Is the Canon 5D Mark IV worth the upgrade from the 5D Mark III? And is it good enough to keep me from being a Nikon shooter? So as most of you guys know, I've been a Canon 5D Mark III shooter for pretty much as long as I've been on YouTube. I've had it for quite a long time, and it's been a good camera for me. Like for the weddings and stuff that I shoot, it's plenty good. It's a fantastic portrait camera, but where I've really noticed Canon falling behind the Nikon and Sony sensors is in landscape photography. Nikon and Sony sensors they've just been higher resolution for one, and they've been so much better in low light. And there's something called ISO invariant, which means that you get to boost the exposure without the shadows just falling to pieces. So Canon sensors, they've been notoriously bad when boosting the exposure in your landscape photos, and those shadows just turn to mush. They've been very, very terrible. So I pre-ordered, and I now have the 5D Mark IV. There's lots of other videos about the 5D Mark IV floating around out there. I don't need to rattle off the specs. You can go to pretty much any other YouTube channel and see those specs. But what I was really interested in is how is the sensor? All I care about really is the image quality of the sensor. How is it in higher ISOs? And how is the dynamic range of that sensor? That's been the biggest thing where Canon has been falling behind, is in dynamic range. Any full frame camera is going to be good at a wedding, pretty much, as long as it can focus well. And yeah, as long as it can focus well and do decent at like ISO 3200, you're good. And all full frame cameras are fine at ISO 3200. But when you're doing landscape photography and you expose for your sky and then you boost up your shadows, most times that's where the Canons just fall to pieces. A Nikon D810, you can boost those shadows and you can get really clean results, and that means you don't have to bracket your shots anymore. You don't have to take 3 shots and then blend in using luminosity masks, brighter exposure for your shadows. You can just boost them, and that's so nice, and you get more resolution. The Canon 5DSR, super high resolution, but it still struggles with those shadows. Now, one of the things that so I just shot my first wedding with this camera, and I've also shot a Friday Night Lights high school football game with it. And the first thing I noticed when starting to take images with this camera is the ISO performance is much improved. And you can look at the spec sheets all you want, but until you actually see that you can take a photo at 20,000 ISO and have it be okay, that's a pretty big deal. If I was to take that same shot with my 5D Mark III, it would just be completely unusable. But with this, I would say ISO 20,000 looks like, I don't know, ISO 8000 on my Mark III. So the ISO performance is much improved. I'll put up a couple of examples here. Keep in mind that at the time of recording this, Lightroom and Photoshop, Adobe doesn't have I can't open my raw files in Adobe Lightroom and Photoshop, so I have to do it in Canon software, Digital Photo Professional, and it is the most terrible software in the history of software. It's really bad. So I'm not able to do my full workflow like I would like, but here's a few images anyways. So the next thing I wanted to know is, like, what do the files look like? What do the shadows look like if I take a shot at ISO 100 and then boost the exposure way up? So in this shot here, I did exactly that. This is the straight out of camera ISO 100 shot, couple in the rain at the wedding I just shot. And now this is the same shot, boosted 5 stops. And as you can see, those shadows are super, super clean. Now, obviously, I didn't take the exact same shot with my 5D Mark III because I was at a wedding and I wasn't, there doing a tutorial or making a video. I was actually working. But in this other shot, this is a 5D Mark III shot, and you can see the shadows are equally as dark. And when we boost that up 5 stops, it looks like this. And I think you'll agree there's a huge difference in the image quality there. That's going to be huge for landscape photographers and, interior real estate, stuff like that, where you're having to deal with those big dynamic range issues. That's going to be huge because you can take one shot, boost up those shadows and the black areas of the photo and have it be okay and end up with a much higher quality image than if you were to do it on one of the older sensors. So the verdict is still not in yet. I want to shoot with this. I want to open it up in Lightroom, but so far I'm really liking the sensor in this thing. Other aspects of this camera that I really appreciate. It seems like such a small thing, but the button on the back here, what I've done is I've programmed this to where when I press it, my shutter dial becomes my ISO dial. So now instead of having to look at the top, find the button, dial in my ISO, and then hit the button again, all I have to do is hold this in, move my shutter, and let go, and then I've changed my ISO. That's a big thing. Also, I've changed what is normally the exposure lock button. I've changed that to toggle between AI servo and one shot. So let's say, I'm at a wedding, bride's walking down the aisle, I want it in AI servo, and then she gets to where she's going to be up at the altar or whatever, and then I just hit that, and now I'm in single shot. Never had to go up here to the drive button and then move that over, none of that. Touchscreen works really, really well. I'm still getting accustomed to having a touchscreen because as a full frame user, that's a new thing. I'm not used to using it, but it works really well to sit there and flip through photos. You hit your Q button, you tap what you want to change. You can save a lot of time by using the touchscreen, and it works really well. Focusing system is probably the other thing that I'm the most excited about. It focuses in much lower light. And it's very, very noticeable when you're photographing something like a wedding because you got the mood lighting, right? And it's getting all dark and dim. And my Canon 5D Mark III just won't focus anymore. And it sucks. And it's a big deal because I can light a scene. I can add my speed lights and I can light it. But if I can't find focus, it's hard to get a good photo. This will focus in, I think it's one stop darker situations, one stop darker lighting, and that's a bit, you really notice that. I don't know if the average user would notice that, but as a wedding shooter, you're going to notice it big time. It also helps a lot at football games. I've just found that the focusing system overall is a lot better. So before this camera came out, I was definitely in the camp of I'm about to switch over and go get a Nikon D10 or D810. And that's kind of where I was before this camera came out. And I was like, okay, we'll see what the 5D Mark IV looks like, and then I'll decide. At this point, I'm definitely saying a Canon shooter. And it's not because I feel like this camera is better than the D810, because I'm not so sure that it is. In some ways, that sensor is still a little better. And it's kind of sad that Canon just came out with the newest camera and it's not quite as good, but it's close. But the thing is, I think that the focusing system on this is better, and the lenses definitely are. And as many lenses as I have invested in, I'm just too lazy to go and sell all of my lenses and switch over to Nikon at this point anyway. If the D820 comes out and there's just something groundbreaking, that could change my opinion. But as of right now, I think the 5D Mark IV is good enough for me. And it kind of sucks that we have to say good enough when spending $3,500. But right now, there's no other camera out there that is just miles better than that. This is definitely right up there. Focusing system better than D810. Sensor, it's close, but not quite as good. And then there's also the Sony A7R II. That sensor is amazing. And if I was a landscape shooter only, that would be the camera for me. The weather sealing on it might worry me a little bit. The weather sealing on this is excellent. But where this is miles ahead of that is the focusing system and the lenses. That's kind of a big deal. And so because I shoot portraits, because I shoot weddings, this is a better camera for me. If I was a landscape photographer only, that Sony a7R II would probably be what I got. So anyways, I just wanted to give you my initial thoughts on this as I'm able to process my raw files, because that's kind of a nice thing. Once Adobe releases the profile for it, I'll come out with another video and show you guys a whole bunch more of comparisons between the 5D Mark III and this guy right here. All right, thanks so much. Like, subscribe, and we'll see you in the next video. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.